Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. I am back from Iowa and it's time to answer some comments. All these comments are from the Guess the Banzuke video released last week, and I'm just taking them in the order YouTube decided to set them up. So, without further ado, let's get to it. First comment, yeah, the math on screen kinda sucks. Previous way was way better. Second comment, and third comment, and look, a lot of people did not like the new way of doing it. I agree that having the more movement on the screen is better, it looks better, it's more fun to watch, and I like having a reason to use my tablet and draw the telestrator lines when it's suitable. So yeah, we're gonna go back to the old way for next time. If I come up with another idea for how to do this differently, I'll wait a little while to try it. Jack's Facts says, also for my classes, by the way, what classes? I'm curious. Studies have shown that the best way to compare changes, like in positioning on a map or a list, is to have them be overlaid on top of each other and flip between them. People are way better at noticing differences if they don't have to move their eyes across the screen. I completely understand this. I was trying to think of a way to do something more like that, and in certain parts I have the two, like the math and then the movement stuff overlapping slightly, but yeah, being able to switch back and forth would make a lot more sense. Frankly, I just haven't found a good way to do it. So if I do, maybe that'll be the next new thing that I try. But, you know, for now, for next time, we're gonna go back to the old way. Jack again, and now we get to talk about the Banzuke. The clincher here is predicting where Asanoyama will fall to. You have him super heavily demoted even though they've never gone below rank 10, though the sample size is fairly tiny. Also, putting Asa at 10 East makes the demotions way better rather than over and under demoting everybody. Well, the thing about the rank 10 is that it's not actually true. Normally when I look into the past for what's happened, I don't like to go past 2004 because that's when they changed everything, and so everything became a little more uniform at that point. In this case, I went back a little bit further to show 1992, where Tomoe Fuji went from Komusubi to Maegashira 13. Now, it wasn't a complete zero out. He did fight a little bit. Maybe that had something to do with it. But also, and more importantly, Wakataka Kage in 2023 was Komusubi, didn't fight, and dropped all the way to Maegashira 12 West. In this case, I have Asanoyama only dropping either a half a rank or one rank below that. The main reason to think Asanoyama will end up at a higher spot is if you believe that they dropped Wakataka Kage as far as they did because they knew he was going to be out for multiple bashos, so they're like, well, we don't have to put him too far up, he's going to be gone anyway, so let's just drop him a little further down and get him out of there. And that is a perfectly reasonable line of thought. The main reason that I didn't try to find a spot for Asanoyama in that Maegashira 9 or 10 range is that I'm not really sure where he would go. There isn't a good place that makes more sense than all the spots around it. Maegashira 13, I can explain exactly why I'm going to put him there. 13 East, 13 West doesn't matter, I can clearly explain the logic. Because I'm not sure why I would want to pick 9 East over 9 West, or 10 East over 10 West, or over 9 West, they all kind of jumble together, and so I don't know exactly where he's going to end up, even if I believe he's going to finish in that 9, 10, maybe 11 area. To put it another way, and I think I said this in the Guess the Banzuke video, but I don't remember, I don't think it's 50-50 or better than 50-50 that Asanoyama will end up at Maegashira 13. I just think there's a better chance of that than any specific slot above that. Comment from Biso. Here's a question for you. Assuming we didn't have all these gaps in the Joy, shouldn't Daisho be a Komusubi? Same thing happened last Banzuke with Asanoyama going from M1 to K, even though he could have ended in S, in Sekiwake. And I'm bringing this one up because I'm actually not sure what question is being asked. I do have Daisho as a Komusubi. I think that is correct. It doesn't sound like the thoughts came out the wrong way, like you meant is he going to be, or shouldn't he be at Sekiwake? It sounds like you meant Komusubi, but yeah, I agree with you. He should be a Komusubi. It's the one thing that really makes sense. I suppose he could get bumped up to Sekiwake if they wanted to, but that would make the Banzuke so much harder to create overall. I really doubt that's going to happen. So I'm actually with you, Komusubi seems correct for Daisho. I don't understand how the math works, I just like watching the videos. That's awesome and I really appreciate it. Summer, however, gives a really good description of how it works. Take a wrestler's final record from the previous basho and subtract the two numbers. Now Summer's example is 9 wins minus 6 losses equals a difference of 3, so that means they should wind up going 3 ranks higher on the Banzuke by the math. That's absolutely correct. Just remember that it also works in reverse. Sometimes people have a weird inability to deal with negative numbers the same way they deal with positive numbers, but in this case, it works exactly the same way. If they finish 6 and 9, then it's 6 minus 9, which is -3, so they go down 3 ranks. The math really is that simple. It's figuring out what to do with the order they end up in that becomes complicated. Comment from Pat Tuber. I have no interest in doing the Guess the Banzuke myself, too many moving parts, I understand completely, but I am curious how you've been placing. Pretty good, actually. In the last Basho, I finished 26th out of over 200 people, so it was like the top 15%. Top 10 to 15% is where I tend to place. I try to stick with the really obvious answers and then use the most likely possibilities, even though I know they're not all going to work out. I try not to get too out there with my guesses. So that actually makes it less likely that I'm ever going to win one of these, but overall there's a top 10 that they keep. It's based on how you've done in the last 6 Bashos, and I'm now number 6. This is the first time I've gotten into the top 10. To me, this is more meaningful. To me, this is more important. It's more difficult to be consistent over a period of time and do very well than it is to take a few chances, get lucky the one time, but then kind of throw the rest of the Bashos away. You know, you have a championship, you have a U-show on your side, but you also are like number 50 because you finished 200th all the rest of the times. What I think is worth noticing is that I have 11 Bashos to my credit. I've only been doing this for a couple of years, even though Guess the Banzuke has existed for like 26 years at this point. But I'm not the newest person on the list. Chugakusha is newer than me, Kale is newer than me, Tim Sumo has been doing this just a little bit longer than me. The way the Banzuke is done has changed so much over time that I think you really got to give a lot of credit to people like Ryonito and Panda Azuma and Gali no Hana, because they're able to keep up with the changes and still kick ass at this. A lot of people struggle with that a little bit more, but they've been doing great for a long time. The CPU says, not asking anything for now, just wanted to say, have a nice travel. I appreciate it. Iowa is Iowa, like, you're going to feel about it how you feel. But the Muay Thai tournament I was at was fantastic. There were 690 scheduled fights. Not all of them went off. Some people had to drop out. That's what happens when you have tournament fighting. Some people get hurt, and even though they win, they can't continue. But we were judging. So the way the system works is you're on a team. That team works for an hour and then gets a half hour off. And then you cycle through for the whole day. The days ran from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Thursday, and then 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. or so, 6 or 6:30 p.m. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So it was a long weekend. I was absolutely burnt by the end of it, but it was a great time. It's always a lot of fun to be there, and to have that ringside seat, even though you're working and you have to keep your focus on the whole time, it's a blast. I would recommend it to anyone with a serious interest in Muay Thai or just combat sports in general. See if you can get into officiating. Being right there on the edge of it, if you're not going to compete yourself, it's freaking great. I love it. The Salted Salmon asks, hey, does anyone know where all the VODs from the latest Bashos went? It looks like NHK completely gutted their sumo playlist, and Don Don's second account got hit too, so I have nowhere to watch recent sumo now. So for NHK, that's not unusual. There's a day of sumo, and then the next day they put out their highlights for that day for Makuuchi, and then something like 2 weeks after the tournament ends, they remove it all. They don't keep it up. That's normal for them. If you want to keep it, you got to download it and save it yourself. As for Don Don's second account, I didn't even know he had a second account, so I don't know anything about that. But I have mentioned a couple times previously, I got hit too with the Yeats videos, so it looks like they're on another mini rampage. There's just not as many targets this time. Maybe they're just trying to keep the rest of us honest so nobody tries to pull a Natto again. Blender Wiki says, some nonsense but overall interesting video. Look, I don't have a problem with it if you think some of what I say is nonsense, but you gotta tell me what it is. You can't just leave me hanging like that. What nonsense? What is nonsense? You gotta tell me these things. And here we have a pretty epic comment from Ciaran Leonard. And just that first name makes me think I am absolutely butchering the pronunciation in yet another language. Sorry if that's the case. Reasons to keep Takeru Fuji in Makuuchi. Fastest progression to the top division from the lowest division. First wrestler in 110 years to win the championship on his debut in the top division. Never had a losing record when competing on the dohyo. His only top division competition is 13-2. Set a new record of 11 wins in his first 11 top division bouts, beating Yokozuna great Taiho. Fastest top division winner since debut in sumo. Winner of 3 special prizes in a row in his only Makuuchi tournament, the first in 24 years. I'm not going to argue any of these points. I am sure that the commenter, I know that they know full well that this just isn't how things are done in the sport. This isn't an argument that the Banzuke committee should do things this way because it would actually fit what they do. They know this isn't the case. It's just a reason why Terufuji should be treated differently. And you know what? That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that opinion. There's nothing wrong with feeling that this guy is exceptional and should be treated as an exception. I think for a lot of us who are international fans, it is a little weird to see somebody who did so great be treated like everybody else when anything goes wrong, but that is just the way the sport works. I think the biggest thing in favor of just treating them like everyone else is if they don't, where does the line get drawn? What determines whether somebody should be given special treatment? That's why when Oonosato was bumped up like about a rank higher than I think anybody expected him to be a couple bashos ago, it was like, yeah, you're definitely giving him special treatment, and it was really weird to see. And even though it's worked out in terms of getting him to Komusubi and then Sekiwake that much faster, it was an idea that might have backfired if something bad had happened. When it comes to somebody who did amazingly well but is injured, you just never know when they're gonna come back from their injuries or how they're gonna look. So is he even on that Oonosato level anymore where you can really expect greatness from him on the return? I don't know. Reasons to demote Terufuji to Juryo. Non-appearance for the Mei Basho, which must be shamed and punished. The maths. This one is a little more unfair, and even though it's kind of the flip side of the positives, it's sort of sarcastic in a way that I'm not sure is really helpful. Non-appearance for the Mei Basho, yeah, which must be shamed and punished. There's no shame attached to this. If you want to look at it as a punishment, again, it's the same type of quote-unquote punishment that everybody else gets in the same situation. So it's, in that respect, it's only a punishment if you think simply being injured is punished in sumo. A lot of people think that's the case, and I understand why they think that way, but it's not anything unusual. The maths. As I've discussed, the maths just set up the relative order. The relative order is what determines where everybody ends up for the most part. It's not the fault of Nishiki Fuji, who I have going in at 17 East in the last slot, that Terufuji couldn't fight. He did what he could. It wasn't much, he only went 5 and 10, but it was just enough in this case, to probably keep him in the top division. Here's my argument. It would be more punishing to the guy who would get that last slot to push him out in favor of the guy who was hurt than it is punishing the guy who was hurt to let him drop to wherever the math says he should drop. Going on. Obviously, the sensible maximum punishment for Yusho winners would be to negate all the March gains and start the July Basho in the same position as the beginning of March, Maegashira 17 East. So this seems pretty fair. I don't think this would be a problem at all. However, Sumo DB is down as I record this, but I'm pretty confident in saying only Yokozuna and Ozeki have ever won a tournament and then gone Kyujo for the whole next tournament. This is a kind of situation that the Sumo Association has never had to deal with before, and even though they could surprise us and do exactly this, put Takerufuji at 17 East and show that they were thinking of this idea, I just think they're gonna ignore it, they're gonna treat him normally, and they're gonna hope that they never have to deal with this again. Ranking system should be renamed the non-attendance shaming system if Takerufuji is in Juryo in July, as clearly Takerufuji is still one of the top 42 wrestlers despite missing this one tournament. But we don't know that. Yes, in terms of skill, he's fantastic. He's obviously top 42. Hell, he's probably in the top 10. But there are other guys who are very arguably in the top 42 except for their injuries. He's not alone in that. He's just the most obvious example. I think a more fair way of dealing with him would be the way they deal with guys being promoted out of Juryo is that they only give them a very limited rise no matter how well they do and from whatever rank. If he goes 15-0, 14-1 and is obviously killing it, give him a little bit bigger of a jump than they normally would. That's the way to treat him more fairly. Dropping him down to where anyone else in this position would go and then asking him to show that he's okay is not that unreasonable. People say they want to help and protect injured wrestlers but expect them to wrestle limping and crippled to gain 1 or 2 wins to stay in the division. Yo, I am with you on this, and I've said it multiple times. This is why a lot of people want to see a return of the Kosho system. The Kosho system would be exactly for situations like this. Takerufuji is probably the most prominent example of somebody who really could have used that. If the Sumo Association is being short-sighted, it's in refusing to bring a system like that back to protect gifted injured wrestlers and give them a chance to recover a little more properly before they return. Takeru Fuji, he's been reported as saying like his ankle still hurts, it's not 100%, but he can work with it. Well, if there was a Kosho system, he could have held rank and then sat one out, gone down to Juryo 2, but gotten 4 months of healing instead of 2. That's another way to use the system that could be really effective. But until we get some sort of allowance for injury back, the problem of guys, not Takeru Fuji, but a lot of other guys, kind of gimping up to try and save their salary or save their position in Makuuchi by getting 1 or 2 wins, that's going to remain a huge problem. Or maybe injured wrestlers should accept the demotion because rehabilitation will just happen in exchange of a reduced salary in Juryo. As I said about Takeru Fuji, the reduced salary really isn't that big of a deal for him. Like, he should come right back up. The issue is for guys who are going to drop out of Juryo and lose their salary entirely. Like, this comment is using Takeru Fuji as an example, but he's not anywhere near the best example of why problems exist in this system. He'll be okay. A lot of other guys need more help. Maybe Takeru Fuji should miss out in July also and achieve the double rehab in Makushita. Amateur status, but he will feel all the better for it. That sounds sarcastic, I think, but I would actually say that's a real good point. From Juryo 2, which is where I think he's going to end up, if he goes Kyujo again, he probably ends up in Makushita. There's a small chance he wouldn't. There's a small chance he would stay in Juryo. But even if he drops to Makushita, that's just more rehab. And he's got such a good future ahead of him and so much money probably coming in as he goes forward with his career. This would just be a minor hurdle for him to overcome. So if his ankle is still bothering him, going down to Makushita or risking going down to high Makushita is probably a perfectly reasonable idea. He's not going to do it because that's not what sumo wrestlers do, but it would make a lot of sense, and I wish he would at least consider it. And finally, put some respect on Roga's name, son. No.